portrait of Harriet Taylor-Mill.
She's very attractive, isn't she? Apart from the bug eyes. Why did portrait painters paint them all with bug eyes in those days?
Well, I think it was fashion more than anything. I mean, if you're going to shell out so much for a city, you don't want a, a pair of common or garden eyes, do you? She was a looker though, wasn't she? Here. It says here that having had 3 children by her husband, John Taylor, a scandalous affair with John Stuart Mill was never consummated. Even after later they married. Hardly seems credible, does it?
How long are they together, does it say?
28 years. Well, I suppose you can't rush these things, can you?
Hang on a minute. Just because there isn't obviously any sex doesn't mean that there wasn't passion.
Well, no, it doesn't say that, you're right, but I mean, it's a fairly safe indication, I'd say.
Oh, hang on a minute. I mean, in my mind, as far as I'm concerned, there could have been any number of reasons as to why they didn't have sex. I mean, well, he could have been impotent, or well, there could have been some other problem. I hate it when the salacious details are stated so boldly. It's just like a tabloid newspaper, and it's just so disrespectful to the subject. Does it say anything else about it?
Yeah. You see, it does say that born in 1807, she was one of the first female radicals and political activists.
Yeah, why am I not surprised? I mean, I bet there's a fair sample of these potted biographies where they somehow managed to link her radicalism with them not having sex. I wonder what she was really like.
John, sit down. She'll be down presently.
What have we done, my love?
Don't be ridiculous, Tom. We haven't done anything. We simply took Hattie and John to Mr. Fox's for an evening of spirited debate and entertainment. What other foolishness may have resulted is not of our making.
They absolutely mooned over each other like a pair of cows.
Well, I blame John. He was absolutely insistent on playing cards all evening long. I saw her looking over at him from time to time. You know that look, Tom? She used to make you very uncomfortable with it, even as a young girl.
The question is, was she behaving in a fit of pique toward John, or has this Mill fellow really bowled her over? They were positively rude to 2 or 3 of their party, you know, weren't they? Talked through their fanciful notions.
Well, I intend to come straight to the point with her. Well, at least I will when she comes down. It's nice to have the grandchildren to stay for a day or 2 when Mr. Taylor is away in the north. But goodness, doesn't she spend an enormous amount of time with them?
Well, I'm parched. I'm not going to wait. Do you fancy a small glass, dear? I thought I might call for one.
It's Tuesday, Tom.
Oh, yes, of course. Never mind. I shall just pop my head round the pantry door.
I swear they'll wear me out one of these days. Hardy just wouldn't settle.
Your father and I were talking about the dinner we had at Mr. Fox's the other week, my dear.
Is this going to be about Mr. Mill, Mother?
You know your father and I were remarking, well, couldn't help remarking, on the way that Mr. Mill seemed to enjoy your favour more than any other person there present.
Had John seen fit to join our party, then I'm sure he would have seen more than his fair share of my favour, as you put it. But since he was determined to spend the evening with his face in a hand of cards rather than join in our debates, oh, Mother, they were clever people at Mr. Fox's, and it was an enthralling evening. How often do we get the opportunity to spend the evening debating like that?
Well, I suppose it never really was John's taste, was it, dear? And so you made him a little jealous. Never mind, he'll soon soon get over it. As will Mr. Mill too, no doubt.
That would be a pity.
I'm sorry, my dear, you've lost me. A pity for whom?
A pity for me if Mr. Mill were to forget me so soon. I swear I've never had such attention. And not toward my person, you understand, but toward my thoughts and ideas. He entered entirely into debate with me, and he saw and admitted the justice of my ideas, especially relating to women. I've found the seriousness of his interest quite fascinating.
Be careful, my dear.
I'm afraid it's too late for that, Mother.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
I said I love him, Mother, though not in as many words.
Love him? You love him? But you are a married woman. You have a husband, 2, nearly 3 children. What do you mean by this?
Well, I haven't spoken to John about it yet, of course. I must do so soon.
But why do it at all? Does John have any idea of this attachment? Oh, my dear, I know your father and I have always encouraged you to... And does Mr. Mill share your feelings?
He does. We have corresponded for nearly a fortnight now. He has declared himself in love with me. We have no agenda and no expectations. We make no plans.
But he unsettles a young married woman as easily as to kiss my hand.
We make no plans. But he loves me and I love him.
Well, I feel extremely for John. You are his wife, the mother of his children. He provides for you. And he loves you, I'm sure of it. Why not 6 months ago? Your father and I saw you off after a lovely evening here with great complacency. We'd never seen a happier couple. What has happened, Hattie? Can you not tell me?
I won't deny that some events have come to light. Matters that lead me to question my status as John's wife. And to wonder at this marriage. This thraldom in which I find myself.
Thraldom? What stuff! Goodness, child, I haven't heard such nonsense. John is older than you, right enough, but I can vouch for his character. And as for locking up my own daughter, really...
Madam, I was referring to the institution of marriage when I spoke of thraldom. Not every couple can be like you and father. I had high expectations of John, as I know he had of me.
Would you please have a word with Mary in the morning, dear? I'm perfectly happy for the servants to have their Tuesday nights, but they can at least leave the water jugs in plain sight and not leave me to rummage through the pantry looking for them, don't you think? What's going on? Is somebody going to tell me, or am I to spend my usual purgatorial week or two in the dark?
There's no such place here, as you know.
Dearest, please allow me to use figures of speech in my own home. Don't have me hung 5 times a day for my piety. Now, what's up? Is someone going to tell me?
And we were discussing the children.
We were not, father. We were discussing Mr. Mill.
Oh, dear.
Mr. Mill and I are in love.
Is that it? All of it? Well, that's all right then.
All right.
Well, Hattie's married, isn't she? She's not an imbecile. She knows her duty. Nothing can come of it.
Oh, Tom.
My duty. And what do you mean, sir, by that? I will not be lectured on duty by a man, not even my own father. How can you speak of duty when half of the married men of this town seek to consort at will and on a near daily basis with common prostitutes?
I hope you're not including your father in that general assertion, dearest.
Of course not. But barring Mr. Mill and possibly Mr. Fox, I can think of no others of whom I am certain.
What about John, dear?
Hattie, my dear, you're a married woman now. I have no rights over you. All those rights and obligations were assigned to John Taylor when your mother and I made the match. Now I know how you feel about such bargains, how you abhor them. But it was made and made for the best. Whatever his faults elsewhere may be, John Taylor has been a doting husband in his own way. He doesn't believe in your philosophy, but he does. He has joined Mr. Fox's Unitarian chapel. He has given you the opportunity to mix with people of a radical bent like your own.
My dear, he doesn't have your quickness, but he has submitted to himself to the society of these clever people, so that you can continue to grow your abilities and your philosophies. Only a very good man, or one who is deeply in love with you, would submit himself to such an arrangement.
And now I'm to throw it in his face by falling for one of these clever people, as you put it. But Mr. Mill, is not simply clever. He has passion and a deep and fundamental desire to change the world for the good of the common man and woman. Surely you can see what it means to me to have the admiration of such a man.
Harriet, you are a married woman. You have pledged yourself before God to your husband. The scandal that would ensue would engulf the three of you. It would make the Unitarian Church a laughingstock. It would damage the radical causes that Mr. Mill and you are so passionate about. And it would damage his career. Oh yes. He has no major works to his name so far. Just his father's name and a number of very clever articles. But a scandal, badly managed, would stop that young man's career dead in its tracks.
Father, thank you. You've made your point. You both have. I'm to bed. But let me just remind you once more that we have no plans and no expectations. We wish merely to collaborate, to work closely together, and to see if we cannot, between the two of us, do some good, move our ideas on a little way.
My dear, you'll exhaust yourself. Come and sit down. I really don't see why you have to read with young Herbie every night. Come and sit down by the fire. What have you got there?
It's an article by Mr. Mill for the review. He brought it round this afternoon. He's asked me for my opinion.
Anything interesting?
Mr. Mill's articles are uniformly interesting. This one concerns the lessons we can draw from recent events in France. But he is very timid at times, especially when it comes to the role of women.
My dear, that's the 4th time that he's presented himself this week. Perhaps we should set up a room for him and consider charging him rent. Besides, he seemed bold enough with you.
I beg your pardon, John.
I simply meant that he seems to know what he wants from you, but doesn't seem to know much about the proprieties of life.
I don't believe Mr. Mill has ever said an improper sentence to a woman in his life, nor had an improper thought. But I see his visits upset you, John. Will you not tell me your mind? Doesn't reflect well on me either, you know.
My dear, I have no doubts as to your scruples, but as far as Mr. Mill is concerned, the mere impropriety of his visits means that he is not a man of the world. I fear that he is making an attachment, however unreciprocated.
The attachment is not unreciprocated, John. I share Mr. Mill's passion for social justice and for the improvement of the lot of the working family, and I am flattered that he seeks out my views. You never ask me my opinion on anything.
What the devil do you mean by that? I hear nothing but your opinions every day of the week on a number of different topics.
You're at your club most evenings.
Oh, Hattie, do not be unjust. I haven't been there for 3 years, and when I did set foot there a couple of months ago, they had to check the membership. Couldn't remember who I was.
Nothing has changed in that sense, John. This is still your home, and I am still your wife. Your children are safe asleep upstairs, and in here. But here there is a cooling, an unwanted and unlooked-for chill. You know the reason, and you know the cause. I have tried to rekindle my heart 100 times, and you are a kind man, John, with many qualities.
The only quality I covet is the ability to make you love me as you once did. Is the illness to stand between us always?
You brought syphilis into our bed, possibly into my room. Don't want the man I love to have done such things.
And if this man should want these things undone?
Then he is the more to be pitied.
My darling, when I think of things that we shared and how you enjoyed them, I could compel you, you know. The law is on my side. I have conjugal rights.
Why do you do this, John? Of course you had the right. The law is on your side because husbands wrote the law. It is a bad law, but no matter. Force and payment, that's what it comes down to, isn't it? It was payment did for us, John, wasn't it? Can you not see that a man who compels his wife to submit, on the one hand commits a physical abuse, and on the other makes a whore of his own wife? Do not you see that, John? Is that what you want me to be? Your syphilitic whore?
I did not mean that I would use force, and you know that. I simply meant that in the eyes of the law, I would be within my rights. That's all I meant. I would never exercise them.
John, what are you telling me? That you are to be praised because you elect not to exercise a right that is abhorrent to me and every other woman? Why not stop there? Why not accept the praise for not being a thief and a murderer too? John, don't speak this way. I want a husband who forswears such conditions and thinks them cruel and unjust, not one who reminds me of them whenever he doesn't get his way.
I want these things too, Hattie.
No, John. You mean simply that you would not object to living under such an arrangement. You do not want it as I do. You do not want it for every woman, high and low. You do not want the educational and economic equality that such an arrangement implies. I want marriage to be a charter of mutual respect, not a tyranny of one sex over another.
And so do I.
No, John.
What does Mr. Mill think of such conditions?
We haven't discussed my situation naturally, but I gather that he is against all forms of encroachment on the liberty of the individual, without they serve the greater good.
As I would expect. How would it be if I were to ban Mr. Mill from the house?
I would defy you, my dear. I would let him in.
Then you are determined to continue this association?
I am.
At whatever cost?
No, certainly not. I am a mother first and foremost, and am about so to be for the final time. I would never put my intellectual ambition before their welfare.
And is that absolutely all it is? Intellectual ambition?
John, you know me better than that. I want to change the world. I want to tear up this stinking,
Mr. Mill does.
No. Mr. Mill does not yet agree with me on all of these matters, though he agrees that the marriage contract is a tyrannous arrangement.
And as I said, I do too.
Yes, you do, John. But you are different men. When Mr. Mill believes something is unjust, he becomes a champion for its reform.
Whereas I will only agree from the comfort of my sofa.
You will not agitate, John. You will not challenge the conventions that underpin this dreadful arrangement. Sitting on the sofa, as you put it, perpetuates the situation.
Hattie, should you like more frequent contact with Mr. Mill?
I should like it above all things. Of course, I cannot speak for him.
I think that any man who crosses town simply to put a manuscript in your hands can be spoken of with some confidence. I shall invite him to dine tomorrow evening. This way, Mill, if you'd like to step into the drawing room a moment. Hattie will be down directly. She's just seeing to our eldest Herbert. She always likes to read to him at this time in the evening.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Your note did say for me to bring with me anything that I cared to discuss with Mrs. Taylor, so I took the liberty of bringing a few half-finished pieces with me.
She tells me that she's determined to drag you into the radical camp whereas women's rights are concerned. Tell me, do you find her arguments attractive?
Well, I believe, Mr. Taylor, that it's considered bad taste for one man to shower compliments on the wife of another, especially in his own home. But if you will permit me to be tasteless for a moment, I must say that your wife's intuitive sense of what is right, and her ability to fashion an argument that is both passionate and logically sound, are at times quite overwhelming.
Yes. Well, since you compliment her so eloquently, and since I did invite it, I shall have to excuse you. Ah, I think I hear Hattie now. Please, take a seat. No, not the sofa. That's my spot.
John, dear, Jane has only set the table for two, and it lacks only 5 minutes before Mr. Mill arrives. I thought we were to go straight in. Ah, you're here already, Mr. Mill. Welcome.
Forgive me, darling. Jane was acting on my instruction. I'm afraid I completely forgot that I'm giving dinner tonight to Mr. Esmond at the club. And since I'd only get in the way, I knew that you wouldn't mind if I absented myself. I think I shall walk. It seems very dry out. Good night, Mill. Live right out, dear.
Good night, John. Mr. Mill, you must believe me when I say that I had no idea that such an arrangement was in my husband's mind.
Mrs. T, your countenance. I'm sorry, but I've never seen a jaw drop quite like that before. I have no wish to comment on relations between man and wife, but I believe he just took the game.
I never expected, nor do I feel I deserve such a gesture. It is quite the most extraordinary and generous thing he has ever done in the whole of the course of our marriage.
Yes, of course it is. I'm sorry, Mrs. T. It was not a time for levity.
I think you should call me Hattie, Mr. Mill. I should like to call you John, but as you know, Mr. Taylor's name is...
Plain Mill will do amply, Hattie, please. It's what all my very closest friends call me. Now, I took the liberty of bringing with me an article I've been preparing on the question of women's education.
Goodness, John. I mean, Mill. I'm exhausted. Arguing with you has quite worn me out. But do you know, I don't think I ever spent a happier evening.
My dear Hattie, when I came here tonight, armed as I was with logical argument and nice deliberation, I never thought that I would face such an assault. I mean, this has been altogether different from arguing in a coffee house or in a smoky club. I too I'm wrung out by the experience. Your passion and intuitive reasoning, well, it's quite overwhelming.
Mill, that is not a compliment. You are telling me that I lack training and that I rely too much on my sense of fairness. I believe an apology and a more heartfelt compliment are due to me immediately if we are not to fall out.
Hattie, my remarks, they were heartfelt. But I can see they also damned for ill-directed praise. Very well, Hattie. Let my compliment be this. That never in the whole of the course of my life thus far have I been so stimulated, so intoxicated by the company of one person. I can make a world in this room and never look to travel beyond its borders.
This room is in Mr. Taylor's house, Mill, and I am Mr. Taylor's wife.
I should go, I think. Hattie, I'm 22 years of age. I work at the East India Company. Since the day I was being born, I was a work in progress. My father, he designed that I should be an intellectual colossus, the torchbearer for the ideas of utilitarianism. I know, a ridiculous notion. But I was taught Greek from the age of 3, and the iron bands of a rigorous program of education were taught to me from that age. Hattie, I've known neither leisure or respite in all that time. Look, I'm a man designed for the study or the library, not for the drawing room or the bedroom. Look, a few years ago I broke down. I could no longer tolerate the constant demands of the program I set for myself. Look, although I have achieved a great deal, I've resented every moment. Until this evening. I tell you plain, if all that toil were the reward for this evening, I would start the whole program again, from tomorrow, at the beginning, and with a song in my heart. Good night, Mrs. Taylor.
My dearest Hattie.
As you read this, I shall have left for Dover. As I mentioned the other day, my business should take me away for no longer than a fortnight. My darling, you will be aware that these last 3 years since Mr. Mill's first visit have been a torment to me, with the birth of our daughter Helen being the only intermission. I have spent all this time watching you fall, ever more deeply in love with another man. Exposed to ridicule and the scorn of others, I was able to endure as long as I had some hope left. That is no longer the case. I can no longer ignore the public humiliation of my position. I'm a figure of ridicule in my own club. Indeed, I understand that steps may yet be initiated that will bring about my removal. Even the doormen have taken to deliberately inspecting the top of my head each time I remove my hat, as if expecting a pair of horns to pop out at any moment. Hattie, I have leased a small house in Keston near Bromley. By the time of my expected return, I would like you to have left our home and to have established yourself there. There is plenty of room for you, for Helen and the boys. And on my return, we can discuss future arrangements.
Keston, May 1841.
Keston, May, 1841.
Dear John,
My dear John, at your recommendation, I consulted Dr. Tucson. He has confirmed the progress of the disease and has suggested that I spend the coming winter in warmer climes, if it can possibly be arranged. He has prescribed for me a more toxic course of treatment, which he needs to supervise himself. I'm to make no plans to travel until the course has been completed to his satisfaction. John, with your permission, I intend to take a cottage in Avonmere from October and to return toward the end of March. Dear John, you will recall my distress at our discovering that I was infected with syphilis and that you were the source. Dr. Tucson has still not ruled out Helen suffering too at a later stage in her life. He has set down a list of symptoms for me to be mindful of. John, when I think of what Helen may yet have to endure, and of what I am even now undergoing, I should be filled with a cold fury towards you. But I cannot find it in my heart. I shall take Helen with me to France, of course, but I should also mention that Mr. Mill intends to take a cottage nearby. Of course, his work at the East India Company will mean his occupancy will be irregular, but he means to travel out as frequently as possible.
Harriet, my love, I came as quickly as I could after I received your note. What is the matter?
Oh, Mill, Mr. Taylor has refused to give his permission for you to dedicate our book, The Principles of Political Economy, to me.
His what? But you were persuaded he would not refuse.
I confess I thought it would be a mere formality, and you have to admit that Mr. Taylor hasn't been in the habit of refusing me in the past, and we've been apart these 18 years. He states his reasons thus. I fear we'll have to revert to our earlier decision and just print it in the dedication copies.
But this is monstrous. We've worked for years together on the principles, and are you now to be denied even a mention in the flyleaf? It is not to be borne. I will speak to the publishers. You will be credited as co-author in each of those chapters where you have shaped and reshaped our thinking.
They will not allow it, and Mr. Taylor certainly shall not.
Mr. Taylor has betrayed his better half. And as for the publishers, they can hang. We'll publish in Paris.
We will do no such thing. And please don't speak so
graciously ask his permission, and he refuses you like an oath. What could be clearer? I shall wait on him.
John, you will do no such thing. Oh, I have longed to be associated, no, to be identified with our work in print, there, plainly on the page. I have wished for it since first we put our heads together. But, more than that, I want our work to be read, to influence the decisions and thoughts of others. As long as it's read, John, I am content. No, John, I am content truly.
The injustice
Is what we are fighting. I do not wish this to be about me and my private desires. My sister is brutalized daily by that fiend of a husband of hers, and the world looks on. My sister's plight is shared by countless other women in this country and around the world. I will not allow my own narrow wishes above the wider resonance of this book.
the world should know.
My own husband won't listen, John. What chance have we with the world? I love you, and I love that you understand my longing, and I love it that you will acquiesce for my sake. Mr. Taylor could never understand what this means to me. Now, we must settle on that dedication and send it off to the printer. Shall we say 50 copies?
London, May 1849. My
London,
dearest Mill.
May 1849. My dearest Mill, how bitterly I now regret our leisurely return from France. I have just been to visit Mr. Taylor. I'm afraid his letters in March, earlier this year, complaining of his health, did not prepare me for the sight that greeted me on my arrival. He is gravely ill. Indeed, he is dying. Darling, I have considered the matter, and I am resolved to accede to his request that I stay and nurse him through what lies ahead. Were I to apply my mind to it, I am sure I could construct a dozen artful reasons to avoid the undertaking, but I have no mind to. While John has been the primary source of my own illness and of my concerns for Helen, he has also been a rock. He has spurned the opportunity afforded him by society to play the role of the wronged husband. Indeed, he has treated us both with humanity and with grace and understanding. His love and concern for me have been steadfast, and I cannot deny him now what may become his dying wish.
hold a pass now, I'm afraid. How are you feeling?
The laudanum is starting to wear off now. Will you pass me another small draught?
Sleep has done you some good. There's colour in your face. Helen was up earlier as well for a while. She's been working on that piece you asked her to take a look at. She's coming on very well, you know. Even if she doesn't quite have her mother's fire.
Where have we got up to before I took my nap?
We were discussing your letters, my dear. I brought them with me, as you asked. My darling, you know my feelings on this. Will you not please reconsider?
John dear, we've discussed this again and again. Your letters must be preserved, mine to be destroyed. I will not move on this, my dear.
I hate it when you call me John. Makes me feel powerless somehow. Unable to argue. Argue I will, my love. These letters are the most important record of our collaboration. You know this. Our work has appeared almost exclusively in my name, and now you wish to destroy the very documents that in future generations will ensure that you take your rightful place by my side. You should be a model for women writers. The ideas of equality between political and economic equality for women will grow, are growing, darling, you know this. Ideas are unstoppable. And every time a woman succeeds in public, another nail is fashioned for the coffin of male dominion.
Don't make a speech, dear. I'm right here. You pass me the laudanum again, please.
Yes, of course.
That's better. A young man called Will once told me that my strength lay in my passion and my intuitive reasoning. I remember I pretended to be annoyed, worried that he had not praised me for my profundity. But you were right, Mill. Don't shake your head. You were right. You know you were. These letters, our life together, have been a continuation of that first wonderful, exhausting evening. Don't you think? You fret about my standing, do you not? Do you worry about how I will be perceived?
As would any honourable man. I do not wish to deck myself in borrowed feathers.
Hot stuff, Mill. You have no borrowed feathers. Every word of our endeavours is yours. And much of it is mine. What's mine is yours. And what's yours is mine. But you must not set some silly crusade to have me acknowledged. You will please do this for me.
I will promise you that our work will continue, and that I will work closely with Helen, and that the world will hear of her mother's genius.
Mill, I forbid you to do this. Do you hear me? You are to mount no legacy for me. How you acknowledge me privately, I leave to you, but you are to mount no campaign. It will suffer, our work will suffer, and so will your reputation. once told you, did I not, that I overheard Mr. Carlyle talking to Mr. Reed. He said that your reputation would never recover if you insisted on co-authorship. He said the publishers would not touch them unless you had sole authorship.
We agreed many years ago, did we not, that Carlyle's opinions were suspect. The man defended the slave trade, for pity's sake.
Yes, but on this occasion, he was right. Was he not?
Your letters will give the lie to their stupid notions.
John, the smallest error in my reasoning of my letters will be magnified and will belittle the whole. Every idea will be found to have been borrowed from elsewhere. Every intemperate opinion will show me as a harridan, and every excess of sentiment will reveal my weak mind. Better we save them the trouble, don't you think?
I wish you'd keep a dozen more favourites. You will allow me that at least.
You may keep but a half a dozen, and you'll be hard put to find just one or two that are really generous in spirit. I miss arguing with you, and Helen is too deferential toward you. You'll grow soft.
A few years of kind comments from Helen will do well. It will help me get over the 20 years of battering from you. Oh. I have...
John, the letters. Place a few on the fire.
Let me read you one of my favourites. Do you remember, this is the first note you ever wrote. Sir, be not alarmed, I pray, on receiving a note from a married woman. As Mr. Taylor is fully aware of its contents, I have reflected on your assertions last night, that women may obtain equality within the union without access to independent financial means, and I find it to be nonsense, as I'm sure will you, when you care to reflect at greater length. I shall not enter into a full repudiation here, but will defer my enjoyment of such until we next meet. Yours truly. Whatever part of my heart remained unconquered before receiving that note, not the saliva reading of it, I'm afraid.
You will now place a few letters on the fire.
Darling, I'd intended to wait a little until later. You know that I will be true to your word.
I not once hear of a man who said the same to his wife, and then made a copy of every letter before submitting them to the flames. I thought we might go through a few of them and burn them together.
You know that I will be true to the spirit of your wish, as well as the word. And besides, have you seen how much copy clerks are charging nowadays? And I certainly couldn't give the task to Helen. Very well. If it will make you easier in your mind, let us begin with these.
Mill, will you pass me the book, please?
You're almost out of tincture.
more letters on the fire before you go down.